This is the Engwe LE20 electric cargo bike. It's a class 2 e-bike, meaning the throttle will assist you up to 20 miles per hour, and it's a long-tail cargo bike with an insane claimed 211-mile range. And I don't know if that's my favorite part about this bike or if it's the price. A lot of these bikes in this category go for around $3,000, and you can find more affordable options for about half that price, but the base model of this Engwe LE20 costs just $1,400. Now, I completely understand why a lot of people hate e-bikes, but I kind of think that we need to rethink some of the concepts here. All in all, we really need to get more people out of cars and onto bikes. And I think e-bikes seems to be the easiest first steps to making all of this happen. Plus, they're an absolute blast to ride. Now, I want to be crystal clear here. Engwe did send me this bike in hopes that I would review it, but this isn't a sponsored video, as you will probably be able to tell when I get into my section about things I wish were different about this bike. But Engwe isn't telling me what to say within this video. In fact, they don't even get to see this video until the time that I post it, at the same time that you guys get to see it on YouTube. Now, I mentioned that the base model of the LE20 is $1,400, but I do think that you're gonna want to at least look at some of the accessory options, because if you're like me, you're gonna either want to haul kids on this bike or haul groceries or something of that sort. And my kids are actually getting a little bit old for this. I think the ideal ages for hauling kids on a bike like this is probably somewhere in that like 3 to 7-year-old range. My kids are 9, 12, and 14. But the accessories pack, Engwe calls it their passenger upgrade, will cost you an extra $240. Again, I still think that that's super reasonable here. I'm actually using what they call their cargo upgrade, which was $130, but it adds these extra carrying cages to the front and the back of the bike. But kind of similar to that passenger upgrade, there's also a versatile canvas upgrade package, which basically takes the passenger upgrade that's meant for kids, and it actually wraps this little canvas around it, and it's good for like hauling and moving all kinds of stuff. There's a few other things that you can buy in here, some of which I actually would recommend. There's a flash charging piece here, which basically doubles the speed of the standard charger. And then the base unit of the bike, it only comes with one of those large 922 watt-hour batteries, but there's actually space for 2 batteries on this bike, and that's how they get that claimed range of 211 miles. And it costs about $230 extra to get a second battery put on here. So the way that I have things set up, and probably the way that I would recommend you guys set things up, I think you're probably looking at spending really close to $2,000 here. There's also 2 colors to choose from. There's a gray and there's a blue. Throughout this video, you're gonna be seeing me using the blue edition of this bike. Now, without the extra 922 watt-hour battery, the claimed range is 109 miles. But I wanna give you guys a little bit more of a realistic concept of range with this bike. Now, the company is estimating range based on a 75-kilogram rider riding on flat surfaces. I weigh like 10 times that, or about 175 pounds, 80 kilograms roughly. But the conditions that I've been using this bike have been absolutely anything but flat. I live just north of Portland, Oregon, and we have mountains and hills everywhere. And I've also been taking this bike off-road a little bit, and I've also been loading it up with heavier cargo, loading it up with the cargo upgrade, as well as things like groceries and stuff like that. So I'm actually seeing somewhere around 50 or 60 miles of range per 922 watt-hour battery. So in this setup, with 2 batteries, I can probably go somewhere between 100 and 120 miles. So the weight and the conditions that you're actually riding in are largely gonna determine the actual range that you can expect with this bike. Now, if you do end up ordering the Engwe LE20 bike, the main bike will come in one large box. I actually found building up this bike to be pretty reasonable. I'd say the entire process took me a little over an hour. The main thing that you have to do is install the front wheel, install the front fender, handlebars, seat post, and pedals. I'll actually link to the Engwe build video, which I actually found really excellent. But either way, definitely be sure to check all of the bolts and hex screws. I would recommend just tightening those down a good bit. And then I'd probably also highly recommend taking this to your local bike shop and just spending like a couple extra bucks, like $100 or whatever you need to, just to make sure that they'll go over the bike and make sure everything's safe. My friends over at the Dial Cycling Lab, they actually had some good ideas for me with this bike. Just tightening down the head tube a little bit more and then adjusting a tire a little bit. But I definitely would suggest taking it really slow for just a short ride where you can really double check that the brakes are working just as you would expect and that everything feels correct to you. Okay, to start this bike up, you'll just need to make sure that both or one of the batteries is turned on, and then you'll hold this little hidden button. It's actually underneath the left side of the handlebar. You hold it for 5 seconds, and then the bike will start up. Now the bike starts up with 0 assistance, but you can ramp that up from 0 up to 5. So the idea would be to use something like 1 on flat terrain and 5 on really hilly terrain. And you're gonna feel that pedal assist anytime you push down on the pedals. But right on the right handlebar, there's also a twist throttle, which I did tend to use pretty frequently while using this bike. In using it, you're quickly gonna realize that this is an electric assist that tops out at 20 miles an hour, and then you may or may not actually realize that the pedal assist tops out at 28 miles an hour. And at 28 miles an hour, I definitely found it difficult to keep up the cadence. Turning over the pedals that fast with a 7-speed cassette here did prove some difficulty. I'm sure my cadence was well over 120 RPM at that point. But the motor of this bike is a 750 watt rear hub motor, and it provides 75 Newton meters of torque. The components on this bike are all Shimano. It's a 7-speed tourney rear derailleur setup. And then there's a suspension fork that can actually lock out up front as well here. The bike itself is made of 6061 aluminum alloy, which is interesting because I actually felt like this bike felt super, super heavy to me. It's a 91.5 pound bike, and I wasn't actually sure if it was steel or aluminum when I was actually using it, but the frame can handle up to 440 pounds of load. Again, maximum load, 440 pounds, which is massive. But I definitely get the impression that the maximum load here is specific to the frame of the bike. There are definitely other parts of the bike, like the components, like the wheels, like the tires, that I don't know will support 440 pounds. I would just use 440 as maybe a guide, and I definitely wouldn't push it to the limit. And I could be wrong about that. Definitely check in the comment section of this video, and I'll try to correct any mistakes that I make within this video. Tires are 20 by 3-inch tires. They are puncture resistant tires, and I didn't have any issues with the tires at all. And I did take these off-road a good bit with 0 issues. The brakes are hydraulic brakes, which is super nice. And then it has a 180 millimeter brake rotor. I definitely would suggest that you carefully test your braking distances. For me, I'm used to my road bike. I'm used to my road bike with hydraulic brakes, and it stops pretty quickly. But because this e-cargo bike is so heavy, you really do need to be aware of it, and you need to start braking a little bit earlier than you're typically used to. There's also turn signals on this bike, which is super cool. And then there's a brake light as well. And you probably noticed the front light, which I found super nice. I just needed to adjust it and maybe point it down a little bit so I wasn't blinding the upstairs of our neighbors while riding around at night. But there's also a little cycling computer on this bike. It'll keep track of battery life, it'll keep track of the distance that you've traveled, and it'll show you stuff like what mode of assist that you're in on the bike. Now, I've been riding this bike for the past 3 or 4 weeks now, and I really am enjoying this bike. It's super fun to use, but just like any product that I review, I definitely like to mention things that I wish were different about the device. And I do wish that this was a lighter weight bike. 91.5 pounds is the base weight of this bike. And then I've actually been adding a couple of accessories to it, taking it grocery shopping, just adding more and more weight to the bike. Next, I really wish that there was a locking key for this bike. Again, I've been taking it to the grocery store. I would love to be able to just lock this bike and not have to bring an extra bike lock along with me. It's not a huge deal, but it'd just be nice to have a lock built into this bike somehow. Now there are 2 sets of keys, and that's a bit confusing, but the keys are actually used to unlock the batteries. Popping out the batteries is nice just because you can actually take the batteries out of the bike, carry it over to wherever your charger is, as opposed to moving your entire bike to try to push it up against the wall or wherever that charge is. Oddly, if you purchase the dual battery option, which I kind of suggest, there are 2 sets of keys to remove either of these batteries. I think it'd be nice if there were really just 1 set of keys that work for both batteries. I don't know, it's just a little thing, I guess. To remove the battery pack, you just have to pull up this little latch, flip the seat down. I actually thought that this design was kind of cool, but I'd also remind you guys to make sure that you are locking these batteries in place. A buddy of mine and I were testing out the shocks of this bike and just kind of like taking it off of curbs and fun stuff like that. But the rear battery actually popped out, which at the time, that was the rear battery, and it was actually the only battery that was driving the power to the entire device. So when the battery popped out, the entire bike died at the time. So friendly reminder just to lock these batteries in place. Now, there's a ton of functionality that I would say isn't super intuitive. For example, I really wanted to have control over that built-in front light, and it turns out that you can control it. You just have to hold down that plus button and it'll turn on or turn off the front light and the rear brake light, which I think is great, but it was a little bit hard to find some of this functionality. There's a ton of room for improvement here. I think it'd be nice if you could improve some of the information being shown on the front cycling computer, and then maybe navigating the front cycling computer could be improved a little bit. For example, to get to the settings of the bike, you actually have to hold down the power button for an additional 5 or 10 seconds, and then it'll pull up the settings screen. I think it would just be nice to have access to that settings screen really anywhere from the bike, right from any page on the cycling computer. So I think that there's a lot of potential from a cycling computer standpoint on this little device. I don't think that we should expect a ton, but there's room for improvement there for sure. Now, from what I can tell, you also have to charge these batteries separately. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's 2 different charging sections or 2 different charging ports to charge each of these separate batteries. Now, I also had separate people or multiple people testing this bike. I even put 2 adults on it without too much difficulty, but I really wish that this base model came with footrests or like a little running board on the side here where you could put your feet. Apparently Engwe is selling those separately for $80, or they do appear to come with that passenger upgrade kit. But the base model has this fantastic padded seat in the back of it, which is really nice and comfortable, but it's not really super usable without having a place to put your feet. And overall, I love the design of this bike. For example, check this out. You can actually fold the handlebars down for easier transportation, which I think is super cool, but I actually find some of this a little bit weird. In fact, if you look at it closely, I find that this kind of silver piece being pushed off to the side or off center a bit odd. And I'm sure that, you know, they designed it on purpose so that it folds down to the side, but just from an aesthetics standpoint, I just find that one piece a little bit odd. So there's a few things for sure that I wish were slightly different about the Engwe LE20 cargo bike, but I don't want to confuse you guys with me having a few minor things that I dislike about this device with my overall impressions of this device. This is probably one of the products that I've most looked forward to reviewing here on this channel over the past 5 years. I remember actually counting down the days until it was delivered and telling my wife about it each day. But luckily, this bike has even been more fun to review than I had even hoped. But what do you guys think? Is this something that you guys would consider? What would you guys use it for? For me personally, I'm loving just using it as more of a commuter bike without, any sort of expectations of getting like a workout or anything like that. But it's really fun to just take out and go for a spin or use it to pick up groceries, especially since the weather has been absolutely fantastic here recently. But either way, e-bike or your old beat up rain bike, whatever you have, I just hope that you guys are getting out there swimming, biking, running, rinsing, and repeating it all over again. And we will see you guys on the next one.